Good times, greetings to you all. We're going to look at evidence of evolution. Yes, my name is teacher Obadiah, and I'm back with the video about evolution. Now we're going to look at the evidence of evolution. According to Charles Darwin's theory, each species living today arose from pre-existing species, and this is very common. I think you've read it all over your schools. You have looked at this. No species have evolved from one ancestral type. Natural selection provides a mechanism for one species to change into another. Now, the main evidences of his suggestion was that were paleontology, comparative biochemistry and cell biology, geographical isolation and adaptive radiation, continental drift and independent evolution, and then comparative anatomy. So we're going to look at all of these in detail. So it's going to be a very profound, expounding, comprehensive video. So for those who enjoy such videos, please continue. We're going to explain everything in detail. Now we're going to begin with paleontology. Paleontology is basically the study of fossils, and we all know that a fossil is a remain of a dead organism. It can be a plant or an animal. So, for example, we can find these fossils in rocks, pits, and ice. And the fossils include bones, shells, footprints, feces, and most fossils are found in sedimentary rocks formed by layers of silt. Now, the sediment preserves the body of the dead organism before they can have the chance to decay. Now, in some places, such as the Grand Canyon in Arizona, USA, the sedimentary rock has been laid down in layers called the strata. So we have these different rock layers of the soil that have been formed over time. So you find that some organisms were covered in the bottom layers, and we expect the organisms which were in the deep down in the bottom layers to have like existed before the organisms that are on the upper layers. Now, the depth of each stratum gives the relative age of any fossil it contains. Yes, so we basically mean that all the fossils found in the bottom strata, the bottom layers, are older than those ones found at the top. Now, the deeper the stratum, the older the rock, the older the fossils. Now, to continue, we have rocks and their fossils that can be dated approximately on the basis of how long it takes a sedimentary rock to be laid down. Now, fossil dating using carbon-14, yes, those chemistry students understand what I'm talking about, is done, and after carbon dating with a certain specific tool to date and determine the half-life of the fossil, and the half-life of maybe the particles of the fossils, the carbon within the fossils, and we can be able to relate and different kind of stuff. You know, all that chemistry, for chemistry students, what I'm talking about. So you can be able to get the time, the exact time, or the approximate time when these fossils existed. Now, giving chronological order, giving an idea of how long one group of organisms may have evolved into another. Most fossilized organisms have become extinct. This is true. They have become extinct. Most fossilized organisms have become extinct. We've looked at this so-called species of man, from which man came from, maybe the ancestor of man. They're extinct kind of structures, because we no longer see human beings having such kind of jaws, such kind of structures. Now, the most fossilized organisms have become extinct, but some, mainly the more recent ones, belong to species living today. Now, in comparative biochemistry and cell biology is also one of the evidences of evolution. So here we are going to look at the different biochemicals, biochemical processes, biochemical chemicals, and structures of the cells that have existing that have similarities with pre-existing species. Now, the most persuasive evidence is that all organisms have evolved from a common ancestor, and that is true. So this reveals that when you compare the biochemistry and biology, cell biology, it reveals that their genetic code contained within the nucleic acids are almost universal. So when you look at these things, you realize that genetic code, the code that codes for a certain protein in one organism, is the same code that codes for protein in another organisms. We have these different nitrogenous bases, or the codes that can code for the same protein. Yes, that is true, but those things are the same. If you have it, maybe let's say ATC is coding for a certain protein in one organism, and maybe maybe UCT also coding for the same kind of protein, so it will be the same. So these things are universal. You find the same thing in an amoeba doing the same thing in a human cell, in an animal cell, mammal cell. So such things. Then we have physiological processes vital to all organisms, such as respiration. So these are common. You find them all over all the cells that we can imagine. You find it in a bacterial cell. You just find respiration taking place in a plant cell. You find respiration taking place in an animal cell. This is a very common kind of stuff. So ATP is a universal energy currency in all organisms. Is it all organisms? Or maybe all, maybe those who have not discovered or those that I have not researched about. You can seek out and see. ATP is a universal energy currency, because if respiration, wherever there is respiration, there will also be ATP required. Then we have the cellular and biochemical details of the organisms are quite similar, but any difference can give an idea of how closely different species are related. Now, species that are closely related would be expected to differ only slightly from each other, and detailed comparisons of DNA, metabolic pathways, key proteins, organelles such as ribosomes have been used to work out the evolutionary relationships of organisms. So all these have been used to work out the evolutionary relationships of organisms. So the closer, the more similar these processes or comparisons are, the greater the similarities between organisms, the higher the chances of having a common ancestor, or the closer the ancestor. Now, for example, ribosomes inside the mitochondria and chloroplasts are similar to those in bacteria, suggesting that these organelles have existed in that's suggesting that these organelles, which are existing in these bacteria or existing in humans, show that maybe humans at a certain point in time evolved from these microorganisms. Now, we have mammalian blood proteins can be tested. So this is the part of cell biology, and maybe even the previous parts. Mammalian blood proteins can be tested to see how similar they are and yeah, that's it. So blood serum from the mammal in question is added to the rabbit serum containing anti-human antibodies. Now, a precipitate forms due to the antibody antigen reaction. Now, the degree of precipitation is compared with that by the human serum, and the chimpanzee human serum has 100%. The chimpanzee serum has 97% precipitation. Gorilla serum has 97%. The gibbon serum has 79%. And comparing the hemoglobin in the four species gives the similar results. Now, the amino acid sequence in the chimpanzee hemoglobin is identical to that of the humans, though the amino acids in other polypeptides differ. Now, gorilla hemoglobin differs from human hemoglobin by 3 amino acids. The gibbon hemoglobin differs by 6 amino acids. Now, in contrast, the hemoglobin of the lamprey which is a jawless fish-like parasite, differs from the human hemoglobin by around 125 amino acids. So I think using such comparisons from the given data, you can be able to see that the chimpanzee is so close to human, this gorilla so close to human, gibbon is a little bit far but close to human. And then you can also look at the lamprey. The lamprey is far different from the human, because you can see the difference. The difference is 125 amino acids from human. But then it's closer, maybe closer than some other species. Now, also to continue, the DNA can be compared to check the degree of closeness between organisms. Amino acid sequencing in a particular protein is compared between organisms, and it shows that amino acid sequencing is probably the strongest evidence for evolutionary relationships among organisms. For example, a gorilla shows a 1% difference in the amino acids in hemoglobin as compared to humans. Now we're going to look at another evidence or aspect that you can look at to show that evolution really occurred. We're trying to see these things that we're talking about, the theories, these different studies, prove the occurrence of evolution. Maybe that is occurring currently or that it occurred. So it compares and contrasts the embryos of different species to understand their evolutionary relationships, developmental processes, and shared ancestry. Now, it provides compelling evidence for evolution by demonstrating that closely related organisms share similar embryonic stages. For example, in vertebrates of common embryonic structures, we have pharyngeal gill slits, notochord, post-annual tail. So these things are very common and show maybe they have a common ancestor. So comparative embryology is an evidence of that evolution actually occurred, because we see that these different organisms are from different species and they have similar structures at certain point in their embryonic life. Now, geographical isolation and adaptive radiation are other ways that you can prove or prove that evolution actually took place. Now, we have two different populations that are geographically isolated from each other by physical barriers, such as the seas, the mountains, may experience different environmental conditions. And if the theory of evolution or natural selection is correct, you would expect that the separate populations in different environments would become more and more different from each other as time goes on. Now, this is precisely what Darwin concluded from his observations of animals and plants on the Galapagos Islands, a group of volcanic islands in the Pacific, about 580 miles from the South American mainland. So this is what we are able to see. So if you look at the beaks, yes, if you look at the beaks here, there are different shapes of the beaks. You can see the large cactus finch. You have the small tree finch having a different beak, even a little bit more pointy, shorter. We have a mangrove finch. You see, it's the dark one. We have the wibbler finch. We have the small grounded finch. We have this one with the largest beak, and it's the large ground finch. So these were isolated from the mainland, but still on that islands. With those islands, we found that Darwin found out that they had they were the same species, but the different beak types, beak shapes, and ate different kind of foods. Now, so this is evidence that evolution really occurred, because they are the same species, but how come they have different beak shapes? So they have evolved to suit their feeding different feeding mechanism, to feed on different prey or different food sources. So this evolution occurred due to adaptive radiation. So they adapted to feeding on different kind of organisms, feeding on different organisms. So that's what happened. They had to change. Now we have, although he found only a few species here, A large proportion of them were endemic species. That is, they were found nowhere else. The species on the various islands resembled those on the mainland but differed from each other, and from the mainland species in a subtle but significant ways. Darwin thought that the islands must have been colonized from the mainland by a few individuals belonging from the same species. And the species then evolved independently to fill the ecological niches on the island. Now, this type of evolution is shown by a group of birds known as the Darwin's finches. They are 14 separate species of finch in the group, and all of which probably evolved from individuals belonging to one mainland species. Islands have a few other bird species, and in absence of competition, the finches became adapted to fill the available niches. In particular, they evolved a wide range of big sizes and shapes so that they would take advantage of the food sources on the different islands. Now, the evolution of an ancestral species into different species to fill the different niches is called adaptive radiation. Now, the other evidence of evolution is continental drifting and independent evolution. So we've learned this, the geology students. There's a theory that says that maybe long ago, Africa, South America, Antarctica, India, Australia were all one. They were maybe joined together, maybe a single continent. And later on, due to tectonic plates, the forces doing their thing, they got separated, and the organisms that were on these different continents, although they were on the same continent, were forced to be separated from each other. So on their different continents, they evolved to fill their specific. They evolved to feed on the different food sources, to live in different conditions. Those who are living near the equator, the hot areas, those who are living in very cold places, maybe very thick forests, those who are living in the dry places, they had to adapt to live in those different areas. So this led to the emergence of new species. Yes, these species they got so different from each other that if you had to met these different species from the different continents, they would no longer produce an offspring. So this shows that there's some kind of continental drifting. So the different species evolve differently and change in appearance, mode of feeding, different kind of stuff. You get what I'm saying? So the continents which now exist have not always appeared as they do today. At one time, the Earth had a single large land mass called the Pangaea. This was thought to have broken up in two parts, a northern Lower Asia and the southern Gondwana. Now, over millions of years, the two great land masses split up and moved by the process called continental drift to form our present continents. Now, the theory, just like I described earlier, so you will see that in Australia, many excellent examples of species have evolved independently following the geographical isolation. Now, it is thought that Australia became isolated about 120 million years ago. Now, when marsupials, the mammals without a placenta but with a pouch in which a young develops, and the Eutherians, the mammals with a true placenta, diverged from a common ancestor. Now, Eutherian mammals, apart from humans, never reached Australia until they were introduced artificially by people in the last 200 years. Of course, that is except the Homo sapiens, of course. The Homo sapiens were there, the humans. So, the Australian marsupials were therefore able to evolve in a unique way, filling the ecological niches which are occupied on other continents by Eutherian mammals. Geographical isolation need not always lead to adaptive radiation. Two populations that have, yeah, sorry for that, have siblings. Yeah, but remember, I'm a biological scientist. Anyway, I really thank God for my life, what He has done for me. Yeah, we are studying this biology, but we all need to know that there is a living God that needs to be served, needs to be loved, and needs to be obeyed. Because if we don't, my God, a day will come and you will regret why you did not believe in Him. Now, let's continue. The Australian marsupials were therefore able to evolve in a unique way, filling ecological niches which were um, so geographical isolation need not always lead to adaptive radiation, but two populations that have become separated may evolve similar adaptations independently if they live in similar environments. Now, this process is known as parallel evolution. For example, in South America, porcupines and African porcupines are thought to have evolved independently from populations of their own from their common ancestor, that is a large furry cat, now which became isolated about 70 million years ago, and today the two groups of porcupine look very alike and have evolved similar sharp spines for defense. Comparative anatomy is another evidence of evolution, another evidence that evolution actually took place. Comparative anatomy is the study of biological structures in different organisms. Structures from different species that have similar internal framework, position, embryonic development are said to be homologous. Homologous structures become modified to perform different functions in the species that have lived in different environments. For example, the basic plan of bones found in the limbs of mammals are the same, and this is called the pentadactyl limb, the five-fingered limb. A structure in figure 3 shows a pentadactyl limb that has become adapted to different environmental conditions and modes of life. The fact that the different mammal species have pentadactyl limbs is a strong indication that they have evolved from a common ancestor. This type of evolution is called the divergent evolution, and it clearly results in adaptive radiation. So that is the structure. We are seeing these different limbs that are coming up. Now, the fact that two different organisms look alike does not necessarily suggest that a close evolutionary relationship exists. The structures of unrelated species can evolve to look alike because the structures are adapted to a similar function. Now, these are called analogous structures. Now, analogous structures, just like defined structures of unrelated species, can evolve to look alike because the structures are adapted to a similar function. So we can have different species having structures that are adapted for a similar function, and they will look alike at the end. But maybe their ancestor might not have. So I think you can see the wings of a bat, the wings of a mole, the wings of a bird. The wings of a bat, the wings of a bird. You can look at the hand of a mole, the fin of a whale. You can look at the human arm, the lizard limb. All those things show that maybe some evolution took place. Now, for example, including the wings of the bat, like we described earlier. You can look at the penguins. Yes, so those analogous structures. We also have analogous structures differ from each pair in their microscopic detail and their embryonic development. The process by which they evolve to resemble each other is called convergent evolution. So you have homologous structures and analogous structures. Homologous structures, like we see here, those ones here, and then analogous structures is we're seeing insects and then a bat. They have a different ancestor, but they have structures that perform the similar structures that perform similar functions. Vestigial structures. The vestigial structures is also kind of evolution of evolution. The vestigial structures are so reduced in size that they are non-functioning remnants of similar organs in other species. For example, the human tailbone, appendix, whale pelvis. Now, the vestigial structures shows an organism's evolutionary past. A common ancestor with species that have similar structures that are still functioning. Taxonomy. Whilst it is possible to conceive that all species, both living and extinct, were created separately at a specific time or had no origin, the structural similarity between the organisms which form the basis of the natural system of phylogenetic classification suggests the existence of an evolutionary process. Now, these similarities and the differences between the organisms may be explained as a result of the progressive adaptation by organisms within each taxonomic group to particular environmental conditions over a given period of time. So then, for you yourself, you can directly observe and see that evolution took place, or that evolution is taking place even right now. Because even if you just compare the human beings, as you can see them today, you look at the human beings in Africa, the human beings in South America, Australia, and there's some changes, though we have similar structures and different kind of stuff, but there are those minor differences that you can be able to notice. So if one of these people maybe one of the people in the different continents, maybe we select African people to remain, the future generations will have characteristics that are only African. But if we choose only one continent to stay alive, maybe like Antarctica, still the future generation of human beings will be Antarctica people. I mean Australia like people, Australian people. You get what I'm saying? So they will be different from the people that existed maybe in Africa long ago. You get what I'm saying? So through direct observation, you can see that evolution took place. So the next time you dig around your home and you see this, you should be able to understand that it is a fossil and it might be evidence that evolution took place. Yes. So see you in the next videos.